Hello everyone, welcome back to alkaline hydroxide 784, and today in the history series we'll be doing a strategy episode which will be talking about what you can do before the paper. And here we'll be looking at three sections. The first two are related to what you can do in class technically, so it's about the lectures and tutorials. And the third one will be more of the studying side of things, self-study in a sense. So let's just we'll just get right into it in a sense. So the first one is about lectures. And in lectures, what usually happens is that you have your teacher or tutor basically giving you a PowerPoint presentation about the history content that you have in your notes. Of course, some of them will be more interesting than others, so I don't know, it kind of depends on school by school basis. But what are you supposed to be doing when it comes to a lecture? Well, the first thing that you can definitely do is, to prepare beforehand by reading the notes, especially if you know what they're going to be covering for that day. Like sometimes they'll tell you, oh, you're going to be talking about this topic in the lecture, so at the very least, you can skim through the notes or at least get an idea of what they're going to be talking about. So, but if you really have the time, then do go and read the notes either before or after the lecture. Then it will help you to reinforce the information twice, because reading it in your notes is one time of getting the information, and listening to it in a lecture is another time. And when you get the same information in two different ways, it might be more deeply embedded in your brain. So it would be good to read your notes either before or soon after your lecture. So during the actual lecture, when you go in, you shouldn't be suddenly trying to read your notes last minute. Don't do that. You should follow what the teacher is telling at that point of time, like follow the slides. Listen to the teacher. Don't only stare at your own notes in hopes of trying to follow through with the notes, unless that's how your lecture actually works. But for the most part, it shouldn't be the case. Like, it'll be more of listening to the teacher and looking at the slides rather than looking at the notes. So what you can do instead is to write down certain notes that you think is worthwhile writing down. If you're the kind who needs to keep writing something in order to pay attention, then go ahead and do that, because I sometimes need to do that. Actually, I tend to have pretty fidgety hands, so I need to go and write notes in order to actually focus during the lecture. But if you can just listen to the lecture without writing down notes, that's up to you. But I think you should definitely write down stuff that you think might be useful for you in the essay or something. Maybe because your teacher can use certain phrases or certain ways of expressing the ideas that could appeal to you or could be useful in a way. Because, every opportunity you missed is definitely like a missed one indeed. So, yeah, do be like proactive during the lecture, even though it's a lecture and you're mostly just going through content. It helps you if you're able to either write down notes that may the stuff that catches your attention, or maybe like write down notes as in terms of summarizing what you heard during the lecture. That will definitely help you in the future, in the sense. So after the lecture is over, and if you haven't read the notes, you should definitely read through the notes that the school gives, and whatever notes that you've written down, you can also read through them. And if you feel like there's anything important to take note of, you can either add it onto your school notes, or you can add it to the self-study notes, which I'll be talking about later. So that's for lectures. So the next part will be about tutorials. And tutorials are probably even more important than lectures. So some people might be fine skipping the lectures and just reading the notes. It depends on the school, I guess. But tutorials are definitely important. So at least as far as I can tell, what happens during tutorials is that the teacher will go through certain questions, and can be both SBQ and essay questions, and they'll also be going through the skills. In terms of doing the actual SBQ and essay, we'll be talking about that in the next episode, because I feel like it's more relevant for that. So here I'll be talking about what you should be doing in the tutorial. So during the tutorial, when the teacher goes through a SBQ or an essay, you must definitely listen to what they're saying first of all, and maybe take note of what topic the question is on, and definitely like the keywords in the question that they're going through, especially because different questions may be talking about the same content but have slightly different keywords, which will affect how you eventually write down the answer. So what that means is for those two questions, the content might be similar, but the way that you structure the content would be different. And because of that, you should definitely write down whatever you get in your tutorial, like whatever answer the teacher writes on the board or whatever that they give. Do write it down as much as you can, because they'll be the most important and useful notes that you can get out of your history lesson. They're quite useful, and they can give you a foundation for writing arguments. When you're stuck and don't really know how to start, you can use the tutorial arguments as an example. So I'll be talking more about that in the self-study. So in terms of note taking, what's the best way to do it? Well, if the teacher has a certain way of presenting the answers, you can either follow that particular format, or if you have your own preferred way, like if you want to make it super generalized from the get-go, then you can definitely do that. But I feel like you won't really have time to write super detailed paragraphs or anything. So instead, you should write it in point form, and you can write it as messily as you need to. The only thing is that you need to follow up with it and actually translate it into a type form, which will be easier for you to understand. So talking about your type form, yeah, we'll talk about it in the self-study. So the other thing that you definitely need to do in tutorials is to be prepared. Beforehand, if you know what question they're going to be covering, in a sense, you should definitely read up on the notes. And if you really have the time, please do go and try it out yourself. Even if it's your first time trying it, just try to come up with arguments and think about it yourself first, because that will kind of help you to understand where the teacher is coming from when they give a better argument compared to your one. Like it will give you like if you do it first, then you have a place to stand on from which you can see the higher place even better, in a sense. So you should definitely try it. And after the teacher goes through all the answers and everything is done, you should definitely go back, revisit the notes, and then if you want, you can either do the question again using the notes, or you can do the typing thing, which I will talk about now. And I think one final note about tutorials: if you have questions, do ask them at that point of time, because there's a lot of topics to cover, and usually one lesson will only cover one question from the topic, in a sense. So you should make sure to ask your questions at that point itself, if you actually do have questions. If you don't have any but you have them later on, then okay, you can just ask your teacher in a consultation or something, so that's okay. But do try to ask any burning questions during the lesson itself. It'll probably save you some time, I guess, and will help you understand the material even better. Okay, so I was mentioning self-study a whole bunch of times, so now let's go to that particular section. So after you have all your notes from your lectures and your tutorials, one thing I would recommend is that you transfer them into a type form, or if you have really nice handwriting, they can rewrite them in a nicer way. The reason being is this will allow you to go like wild during your actual lecture and tutorial. You don't have to like worry about arranging your notes nicely or anything. You can write down as much content as you can. Like that's the important thing actually. The important thing is to get as much content as you can during the actual tutorial or lecture. The only downside to doing this method is that you probably need to spend extra time just translating them into typed notes. But by doing that, you could, in theory, basically, like it's like studying the material again. So as you type it back onto a Word document or something, you're kind of revisiting the information. So in a way, it's not completely wasted effort, in the sense it's definitely quite useful to do it. And that's the method I kind of followed. Yeah, so and as you organize all the information into a type format, right? You also think about the information yourself. You make decisions on how you want the information to be organized. So for me personally, what I like to do during JC was to put the arguments into a more common content. But of course, the initial typing out wasn't really like really involve generalizing the arguments. But after doing that, and when it was nearer the exam, what I really did was to have this huge document with all the arguments in terms of content rather than specific to one question per se. So like, because there are two different questions that could be about the exact same thing, but the way that they're phrased can make things so different. Like, the way the actual argument goes quite different. And by so the best way to actually arrange all of your arguments is through content. So, like, for example, if you have the I guess the Cold War wouldn't really be the best example because it's more of an SBQ topic. But okay, let's just say the basically the end of the Cold War. You have arguments for the USSR collapse, and then you have the argument about US being aggressive or stuff like that. And you can put those two arguments as your two content points that you have. And like, there might be certain nuances in the question that that could maybe change the way that you actually use the content, but you still have the content nevertheless for two different kinds of questions that ask the same, like, they're talking about the same period of time, they're talking about the same event. But even if they're talking about two different ways of looking at the event, you can still use this content to your advantage in both essays. So that's why I would prefer that, like, it's preferable to kind of put your information in a somewhat broad argument but still generalizable enough kind of a sense in that kind of content. And this is most useful for Southeast Asia, actually, because the essays there, they do have a predictable method, like movement of information, but at the same time there's always some nuance in the question that you cannot really avoid. So for the actual notes that you have, instead of looking at the nuance part, you look at the main part of the question, which is the content part. And then the nuance part, you have to do it through your skill and like your experience in writing essays, in a sense. Yeah, so that's how it works. Yeah, so like, the reason why I say especially for Southeast Asia history is because international history is just easier for me to understand, so I don't know. But for Southeast Asia history, it kind of helped to have like a table of that compared all of the countries. So like, you put all of the countries: Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Laos. Wait, is Laos included? Okay, Burma, Indonesia, and yeah, is that it? In Cambodia. Okay, I don't remember what the exact countries, but still, like, you put all the countries there, and then you can put each of the factors, like the population. Like, let's say if you're talking about the first topic, the national unity and political unity, that kind of stuff, you can talk about the population, you can talk about the percentage of like minorities and majorities, and you can talk about their form of government, you can talk about their, like, a lot of things. Like, you can talk about each of the factors written a table and stuff like that. That's actually the easiest way to do Southeast Asia history. Like, the whole studying part, you can do it that way. It's actually the most effective way to do it, in my opinion. But of course, it's up to you lah, because if you don't really like this method, then do your own method. This is just my opinion on how to do it. Yeah, so yeah, I hope this video is useful to you. I hope since it is a decently short video, it's only about 15 minutes long, it will be okay lah. Like, it isn't too unbearable to watch. And I hope you look forward to next week's episode. Yeah. And with that, I would, like, if you found this video useful, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.